We're back with part two, and we're talking about Robert's story. And we're getting in the area where we're talking about consequences for choices that we make. And one of the things that I first would like to do, Robert, to talk to you about is as a young adult now, you're an adult, share with us how you viewed, which I think is a very interesting topic for your path and your path choices, your view on credit, or your view on if I wanted to buy a car, if I wanted to buy a house. Say I see my buddy with a $50,000 car, and you want one just like it, or something similar to it. What was your thinking about how to achieve that?
Back then I know nothing about credit. When I saw everybody driving them nice cars, I thought they paid cash for it. So my thinking was the only way you to get that is paying cash for it. I never knew you just work a job, get so many paychecks, and you to go to a buy here, pay here place. Never knew that. I wish I would have, but I never knew that.
And so if you wanted a $50,000 car, for an example, which is pretty easy to get that or higher, right? Is what cars cost today. You couldn't really do it 9 to 5 in your thinking. You would have to sell enough drugs and rob enough, or do whatever you can to take to be able to afford to get the cash built up so you can go put the one down payment. Yeah. It'd be paid in cash, it'd be paid off, but you'd walk away with that brand new car, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's the only thing I thought. I knew a little bit about, because my mom bought a house, I knew you had to get a loan from the bank, but that still was over my head. But credit, I didn't know how important credit was. I didn't know none of that.
And what about you always told me about, old influencers, like, what would you call it? There's a term you used, if an old person's giving you advice. Old school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me about some of the influencers you had that would talk to you and say, give you advice or counsel you. You started to touch earlier about that. Go into that.
Yeah. Like, just the belief system that you can't get out the hood, like I think back in the day it was called redlining. Like that still goes on, which I know now it don't.
Okay.
You never get the promotion. White people will always go promote white people. You always go be the worker. You ain't gonna never get nowhere. Things like that, all negative stuff. Like, and the things that I don't believe ever since I became a Christian and really put God first, like that changed it. But yeah, just I never believed. Well, I didn't believe that I could get anywhere because I had a lot of ambition. So I didn't want to just live normally, so to speak. I wanted to have a nice house. I wanted to have a nice car, nice clothes, nice furniture, nice everything. So I felt like the only way I could do that was selling drugs.
It was an easier path, right? It was an easier path when you have the choices of 9 to 5. And it was quicker, right? It gets you there faster if you could raise a lot of money, a lot of cash.
Well, not even just an easier path. It's just that's the only way. If I worked, I would be stuck in the hood living like this because that's what I saw. But it was because of more reasons than that. Because of single parents and things like that, not having the right family structure is the reason why a lot of people living like that. But I thought that's the reason why, because the only thing I'm gonna do is work a factory job, get paid so much, and just pay my bills and just live. And I didn't want to live like that.
And what you did through the process of just your time being a drug dealer, the consequences from that, though, there's risk involved, right? So you might be able to get fast money versus working 9 to 5, and but the consequences of the risk, right? So then that risk. And you learned from it because you went in jail several times. It was up to as many as 4 times, right? In and out.
Yeah.
Take us through that experience of each time when you got out. I think you shared with me you wanted to do better, but you just couldn't. Too many obstacles, and it was too easy to go back and do what you did. But you got a little smarter. But then eventually the downfall is that's a ticking clock again. You get caught, you're back in jail again. Take us through some of that experience.
Yeah. Every time I went to prison, I used to think like, why my life can't be normal? Why can't I just be happy? Why is so much? And even when I was on the street selling drugs, you know, I had my so-called fun moments or whatever, but it was really stressful. It was really a lot of stress and a lot of suffering, and it's really hard, a lot of pain. But yeah, I say my first time I went to prison, it was for a short period of time. I got out ready to sell drugs again. Thought I could not get caught. But my second time, I started reading because I'm like, I need to. Now my daughter born, you know, I need to get my life together. Like what is something I'm missing? So I started reading a lot of books. I started reading, questioning my spirituality.
Mm.
Started Buddhism, Islam, Christianity. You know, I was born and raised a Christian. So I started questioning that. I started reading a lot of psychology books. You know, Dr. Phil, one of my favorite authors. But I still get out, and I do good for a second. It'd be certain barriers, you know, like no transportation and catching the bus in the wintertime or the thunderstorm. Not having bus fare, you know, because I'm not selling drugs. And that time period, my mom didn't have money. You know, I didn't have money where I could just be like, hey, I couldn't do that. So if it wasn't there, it wasn't there. And so I ended up always falling back. But each time I went to prison and got out, I did good for a little bit longer. And I learned from my experience. Then when I got I think me going to prison was a blessing because each time I learned a little more. My friends, I didn't know that was a big influence. The people I hung around, that brought me back. So I had to change a lot of things in order to get my life together. Child support was a big one because they'd take up to 55% of your check. So I remember I was working at Goodwill. I was only getting like $150 a week, little part-time job or something. And I was keeping up with the child support prosecutors and stuff. And, you know, because I wasn't willing to pay them, but I had my daughter, you know, but I owed arrears from being in prison or whatever. So I get my check, and they took out 55%, and my check was only like $70. I'm like, oh, I broke down, cried with my mom, you know. I'm like, how I'm supposed to live? Like this, like how I'm supposed to take care of my daughter, you know? How this go work? I was so frustrated, and so it's just things like that.
But you also knew the importance, though. That was one of your cores that you built up on. You also realized the importance of paying that child support. The child you birthed, you got to take care of, right, and do those kind of things. And do you remember the time you shared with me about your frustration with your dad? That was one of your. Let's talk about your dad a little bit. Back up to your dad, because that was one of the things. Because where's your dad in all this? Where's your dad as you're growing up?
My dad was in and out of my life. I'm glad he changed his life because he's been very, very, very helpful. You know, in the later years, last 15 years. But back then, he was fighting his addiction with crack. So he was in and out.
Is that the first time you're exposed to crack, to see what crack does?
Yes, firsthand, yes. You know, because arguing with mom over the bill money, going to the grocery store before he came back in our lives, my mom used to spend $100 on groceries. We used to be little kid, you know, oh yeah, okay, we got this. Then when my dad come back, now all of a sudden, he go to the grocery store, he only come back with $30 worth of stuff for the week. And then, so that made me not want to smoke crack. I would never be like him. So I guess it was kind of good too at the same time. But yeah, he was in and out and really wasn't there at the beginning. So male role models, and my brother was in prison during that time. He had to do 26 years. So male role models that I could really trust and really could be a role model, because I wouldn't let nobody else, you know?
Yep.
I wouldn't just let anybody, like, they wasn't there.
And in drug dealing, you know, that's a whole thing is trust, right? Because as you're going through that whole process, you have to be careful. Everybody wants to steal everything you have, right?
Yeah.
So that sets you up another path. Even if someone does steal from you, you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because if you let them get away with it, right, then they're going to want it's your easy pickings, right? You
Yeah,
can't allow that to happen, right?
Yeah, I think that goes a lot with the distrust of the system. So, in the streets, in the hood, you don't tell the police, you don't call the police. So it don't matter if somebody broke in your house, you don't call the police.
You just take care of
You
it.
got to
Take care
handle
of
it
yourself.
Yeah, you do
And
your
that has
own
consequences, right?
Yes. So you got to let people know that you don't play around. So a lot of the things that I did, violent things that I did, was in retaliation was because something they did to me, and I couldn't let nobody do that. It wasn't like I was the aggressor, just out there just.
A set of circumstances. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but you have to do what you have to do. So even though there's consequences.
Yeah, I couldn't let people steal from me. I had to do something.
Got it. What about some of the core values you had, even as far as being a drug dealer? You can drink and smoke marijuana, but when it came from your product that you sold, you had a pretty defined rule that, like crack or whatever it might be, cocaine, whatever, you can't touch it. Go into that a little bit.
Yeah, you can't get high of your own supply because you won't make no money.
Cut your profits, right?
Yeah. So, I smoked weed, and I learned this firsthand. I smoked weed. So at first, the first drug I tried to sell was weed, back in high school and stuff. And it didn't matter how much weed I had, I'll smoke it all up. So that what made me start selling the other drugs.
Got it. Okay.
And I knew not to touch it because how I saw my dad or my sister, people I know that did crack and stuff, I didn't want to be like that.
So you saw the addiction side right off the bat.
Yeah.
Which is part of business, but it's a part of your reality of saying that I'm not going to cross that line.
Yeah.
No, that's a fascinating. That just blows my mind. That whole everything you've had to go through, and just you're thinking, because it wasn't like you were a bad or you weren't good at what your craft was. Your craft is your skill set, even though it had to do with either if it was stealing something or even selling drugs. You got pretty good at it. I mean, the risk was the clock ticking. You could get caught at any time, right? But you did well for a long time. I mean, that's what was easy to go back to, right?
Yeah. I think I was very blessed to make it this far. I've been in so many different situations where I didn't have to make it. And I've been into where I could have been locked up for the rest of my life. And it just, when I look back on it now, it's just a blessing because it was rough. It was a rough patch. That's just me trying to keep it.
Well, I've got friends that have been in and out of prison, and it's crazy when they tell me some of the thoughts are, prison is always something I go back to. That's kind of my walls and my food and my meals all day and all along, I go through. So they're out for a while, but they always know that they're out for a while, but that's like their home to go back to, right? So going home, see mom, they can go home and to back to prison. They don't see it as, oh my gosh, it's a terrible thing. And your vision was to fight to get out, to change that. And that's what I want to get into next at the next segment. So we're going to take a break. We're down with part 2, and we're going to get into part 3. So I hope you come back, and we're going to talk about Robert's success story from what he's gone through. So again, thanks for watching.